Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Hops Geek News, your home for comic books, movies, TV shows, and typically we feature a beer of the week. I am Matt. With me is Lauren, as always, but today we have an extra special guest because this is a creator interview. Michael Schwartz. You may know him from the comic book series Armored that is out right now. The first two issues are out. And then you also might know him as a co-host of Wizards, the podcast guide to comic books, which is absolutely something you got to check out. He is going to be joining us today to talk about Armored, the first two issues. So we will dive into that in just a second. First things first, there is no news, anything like that. You know, with our creator interviews, we like to just dive in and really talk about the really cool things that our creators are doing out there, especially in the comic book realm and, you know, media in general. There's a lot of really cool things, a lot of great people. So make sure you follow them in the show notes. And then as always, Hops Geek News is where you can find us on any podcasting platform, any social media platform. Help us out. That's how the podcast grows. And my beer of the week is a Luscious Lip Sweater from One Family Brewing Co. out of Manassas, Virginia. It is a hazy IPA coming in at 6.4%. I did that because this kind of takes place with like ghosts and knights. And when I think of knights, I think of big burly men with beards, one that I cannot grow because for some reason I cannot grow facial hair.
I have the same problem, Matt.
So there you know, it is what it is. And that's Lauren's voice. So Lauren, what do you got over there real quick?
So we're recording multiple episodes tonight, and so I'm pacing myself also because I'm a very slow drinker. So I'm drinking Hop Cult. And so you'll hear more about this when we drop our episode on Patch and other comic book people that we saw in the Deadpool and Wolverine trailer. This one is a West Coast IPA from Tactical Brewing with Vic's Secret. It is very clear. It is very hoppy. Tactical always does fantastic IPAs and sours. They also do fantastic stouts. So this is delicious, but unfortunately it's not really themed with the comic book. So I'm sorry.
Ooh.
I know. I am ashamed.
Well, we do have our guest. Like I said, Michael Schwartz has joined us. Michael, thanks so much for hanging out with us. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? And then one thing we obviously love to ask is, how did you get into the realm of geekdom, comic books, screenwriting? Because you also did some really cool things on Zombie Town and other really cool R.L. Stine things, which is something that we love to talk about because I grew up with R.L. Stine.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me, Matt and Lauren. I also brought a beer. It is the Chalk Lake Spring Lager from Uxbridge. I don't know if I need to go into more detail about it. It's pretty good, I have to say. It's not bad. It's not bad. Yes, thank you so much for having me. Okay, so you want to know where I got my start in comics or movies?
What is your geek origin story? Because in comic books,
Yeah,
everybody always has an origin story, whether they're bit by a spider, whether their parents were brutally murdered outside of a movie theater, which I hope none of this has happened to you. So how did you get into the world of geekdom, so to speak?
It's so boring. I'm sorry, but my dad is a huge geek. That's really where it comes from.
That's not boring. That's fun.
Yeah, it is. It's fun. It's fun. You're right.
It's a lot happier than anything in comic books.
I grew up in comic shops and video stores. Comic shops because my dad was a collector, and video stores because my dad managed a chain of video stores when I was a child. Into the late 80s. So I have just been around comic book. Like, he was going on a weekly basis, picking up comics, old, new, Silver Age, modern at the time, 80s, of course. And then while he was managing a video store, he was also bringing home like VHS tape for every movie you can think of and either recording them to tape or keeping them for himself. So he's a big collector, and it kind of got passed down to me.
I love that. A lot of people like, man, video stores. That's one I grew up going to, like Blockbuster all the time, you know, and a lot of people are like, what, a video store? You can't just, no, you could not go on the TV, folks. We got Chinese food. And then we went to the movie store where I either got my PlayStation 1 video game or whatever it was. And then we rented the movie for the weekend. And that was it.
I miss wandering the aisles of Blockbuster.
Yeah, me too. That's why I think, you know, like I have a shelf beside me and it is just filled from floor to ceiling of Blu-rays. I'm trying to recreate the video store experience, at least for
I mean, it's awesome because also like one thing that I've noticed with the streaming, because there's so many choices, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, there's too many choices versus like walking through the video store. You had a lot of choices, but there was a lot less.
You had to make a decision because you had to leave.
And then you also had to watch it because you had 3 days to return it. Otherwise you get a late fee. So
or you find it under your bed weeks later and your mom yells at you and then makes you apologize to the Hollywood video guy.
This sounds really real. Lauren.
So how did your love for comics turn into creating comics?
You know, I as a kid, I would attempt to draw comics, but I'd probably give up after 3 pages. I always wanted to be an artist. And then somewhere in high school, I discovered you could go to film school. Like, I'm from Canada. And so I thought just you had to be in LA to make movies. That was like, no one else made movies but Hollywood. Even though I watched a lot of Canadian television and movies.
Degrassi, come on, man.
Yeah, but
everybody knows Drake got to start there.
Of course. But I don't know, maybe I'm not smart or something. It just didn't like, I didn't think about how it got made. And then I had like a guidance counselor say, oh, maybe you'd be interested in film school, because I was making a lot of short films in high school. And I kind of ignored the want to do art and comics and went that way. I've had a love of horror movies and movies in general equally as much as comics. So getting into comic, it was kind of a point where I realized I was just watching or reading so many comics, and there's a whole story behind it. I could go on for hours, but it kind of just felt like the right time. Like I was born in the 80s, and I feel like it's taken me a long time to find out what I truly love writing, and it's comics.
I mean, I was born in the 80s as well, and I'm still figuring out what I want to do.
I was gonna say, like, do any of us truly know what we want to do? Like,
right? Like, my daughter's in college, and she has a better idea than I do.
Obviously, I was born in 1990, so I barely missed the 80s cutoff. But even then, it's like, dude, I don't know. I just figured out that I also like have tried my hand at writing comic books, or like marketing's a big thing I love. And it's like, who cares, man? That's the beauty of life, is you can have as many hobbies that you maybe want to try, especially in this day and age. Why not go for them all?
So now, before we dive into the comic, though, I did want to ask about the R.L. Stine, because again, we both, I grew up reading Goosebumps and then moved to Fear Street, and met, Matt as well. So you have a personal connection to R.L. Stine as a film writer. So can you tell us a little bit about that? And you actually just mentioned horror stories, so you kind of already answered my question of if you have always enjoyed spooky stories, because this comic is a little bit spooky.
Yeah, I've been in film. Like, I started in marketing at Disney. I eventually, do you know the Anne of Green Gables series at all?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I worked for the producers of that series for a while, and then worked at an animation studio. And while at that animation studio, I was working on a movie called The Nut Job, and I became friends. Okay. So
my kids love that movie. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It plays a lot on Netflix and stuff, at least up here.
Yeah.
So I worked on that movie for like 3 years, and I became friends and began collaborating with the director, Peter Lepeniotis. And after he left, he started working on the second film, but eventually left it. He went to write another movie. I forget how it happened or what happened, but his co-writer dropped out, and he knew I had been pursuing writing, and I had written a few things here and there. And he asked me to co-write this movie with him, and we kind of developed a writing partnership together. And that led to him directing a movie called Gnome Alone.
I've seen that one too. Yeah.
Okay.
I do know that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a Netflix movie, and I got really lucky, because I would think working again. My memory's so bad right now, but I feel like I was working on Nut Job 2, and he said he called me, and he was like, "We need a rewrite on this movie, and I'm too busy directing. The movie right now is 40 minutes. Can you turn it into a movie?" And so that was my big break. It was writing Gnome Alone. So I basically took whatever pieces they had and turned it into a full story, and that's the movie you see on Netflix today.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've seen both of those. That's really impressive. Dude, that's so cool. It's like funny how the life happens that way, right? You just start one way, and then these doors open, and next thing you know, you're doing really cool things.
Yeah, I had an agent, and I was pitching a lot of TV shows, and they were going into development, but they would die. And so this was like an amazing opportunity, because it was actually in production, and I got to write it while they were making it. And then from there, Peter and I partnered up, and we just decided, let's just be writing partners. And we've written like a dozen movies for producers that no one has seen yet, because they haven't been made. They're either still in development, dead. Being a feature film screenwriter is really tough, because it doesn't, like, you work on so much. Like, I'm sure you've seen Guillermo del Toro talk about it, where he's like, I have 20 projects in development. He'll talk about the Haunted Mansion or an H.P. Lovecraft thing, and then none of them get made. That's literally my whole career, is like writing movies that don't get made. And then I don't own the scripts either, because I'm being paid.
You sell them.
Right.
Yeah, I have a friend who writes movies, and it's the same kind of thing. He'll tell us an idea, and like 5 years later, the movie might get made.
Yeah, exactly. A movie I wrote in 2017 with Peter is now looking like it could go into production in the fall, which is just mind-blowing. It's boggling my mind right now, because the story of the making of this movie might be more interesting than the movie itself. But anyways, from there, Peter got the opportunity to direct a live action movie, and that was Zombie Town. But similar to No Malone, the script had just been around for years. The Zombie Town script, it was like every writer had took a stab at writing it. And the draft Peter and I were given was like, what is this? I almost convinced him not to do the movie. I was like, you cannot direct this. I don't understand the first 5 pages even. And so he said, well, would you do it? If you, if I get you paid to rewrite the script, would you write it with me? And I was like, of course. Money, I'll do anything for money.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. As a writer, especially writing movies and things like that, a lot of people don't realize that like you get paid for the script one time typically, and that's like the whole point of like the writer's strike that we just went through is like better thing for you guys, man. And
totally, yeah. And I was, at the time I was working in visual effects, so that's something else I do on the side as well, because writing in general is like, yeah, you can get paid well sometimes, but it's like feast or famine all the time. And so I had a really good job, and I was working on the Zombie Town. And so this is a funny story. I don't know if you want me to go on this tangent. But,
I absolutely do. We love tangents. Yes.
The producers could only afford to pay me for 10 pages. So Peter said, I know it's such a low rate, like I won't even take a cut of it. We'll just write like the 10 pages. That's all they're allowing. And so I was like, okay, I'll do 10 pages for that. I could use some extra cash. But then as I got into it, I was like, we cannot just write 10 pages. We have to rewrite the whole movie. And so we sat down together and just completely replotted the movie. But there was like a lot of restrictions, like sets were being built, the locations were locked, so we had to use what was already there. They had no actors attached but two. And yeah, we basically rewrote the script in, I think, 2 weeks. And then he went immediately into pre-production. R.L. Stine signed off on the script. He was like, gave the thumbs up. And then while we were on set, back to your question, Lauren, we got to meet. We were supposed to have him on set, actually. He was going to play a role in the movie, a very minor like cameo. But he couldn't make it to set because we were shooting in the middle of nowhere in Canada, Sudbury, Ontario. Far north, it's like a mining town. They mine for nickel up there, or they used to. I don't know. So he couldn't make it. So we had a Zoom call, and that was the first time I met R.L. Stine, was over the Zoom call. And he is just the most friendly person in the world. Like, he gave us his blessing. And then he ended up playing a role. If you end up seeing the movie, there's a little thing at the end. He wanted to still do a role, but over Zoom. So we had to come up with something on the spot for him to.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. I do remember I did watch this movie the second it came out. My wife and I have always been big fans, and we were like, oh, this is coming, and it was awesome. Personally, we loved it just because it's the right kind of, like, we love the cheesiness of it. It reminds you of like reading a book when you're growing up. So, and I think you guys perfectly captured like the spirit of what R.L. Stine would have written. Like, it's funny hearing the behind the scenes of like how that all transpired now that, like, having watched it last year when it came out. So I mean, that's wicked. I mean, at the time it's probably not as cool because you're like, oh god, it's stressful, but getting to hear think back, it sounds like a funny story.
Yeah, I have to admit, Peter went through all the stress. He took all the brunt of it. I just got to enjoy a lot of it. But yeah, it was tough. Like, I don't think people realize, like, it's a low budget Canadian movie. Like, the producer, I found out, lives down the street from me. Like, he lives in a small house. Like, this is like it really is a very Canadian movie. And Peter, going into it, me and him talked a lot about Monster Squad and just 80s kids movies. And he was trying to get the essence of that while also knowing we had so many scenes cut. Like, we cut like sequences that were paying homage to Dawn of the Dead. We were doing all this stuff, but the budget just had so many limitations. And like, there were days where they ran out of time, and Dan Aykroyd would be like, I'm just going to do this. And we're like, okay, go do it.
Sure, why not?
Dan Aykroyd, do what you're going to do.
And he, and I think we all knew, like, let's just have fun with it. And it is a kid's movie. There's no zombies aren't biting anyone in it. They're soul sucking zombies, and then everyone gets their souls back. Spoiler.
I was gonna say, way to ruin it, man.
So yeah, I'm happy you say that, because I think a lot. Unfortunately, I think some of the marketing was like, see this new Dan Aykroyd Chevy Chase pick, and it's like, no, it's not that. It's a kid's R.L. Stine movie
on SNL.
Yeah, it's it's a really good entry level horror movie for kids. Like my
Which
daughter.
is what R.L. Stein, I feel like, is known for. Like how many kids he introduced
Yes.
to horror. I mean, he thought you were so cool if you could handle reading Goosebumps.
Yeah, and so that's what we wanted. Like I was like, this would be great if my son, who was 5 at the time, could watch it, or my daughter, who was 8 at the time, could watch it. And they ended up
It's funny.
loving it, and they rewatch it with their friends. So
Yeah,
I have
it's almost
currently I have an
spooky
8-year-old
season.
son and a 5-year-old daughter. So that's funny because we're gonna show like my son this movie for Halloween. We love to rewatch stuff. And I wanted to get him started because they're scared of a lot of things. So I want to start getting them interested. So it's funny you say like your son was 5 at the time and your daughter was 8 at the time. So it's just like the kind of mirror and everything like that. It's the perfect entry. It really is. It's fun. It's not scary. They come out of like the movies because it plays off the old ancient Egyptian, and it's just a good time. It's a good time, man. It's what movies should be. But
Well, and sometimes when we go back to like Monster Squad, I'm like, this would not get made today. Like I rewatched that with one of my kids a couple of years ago, and I was like, whoa.
I know
But-
my wife, when I showed my son it, he was 3 when I first showed it to him. She was like, "This is like,
Yeah,
all
there
the-
are some lines definitely crossed.
I-
We
every
all
time-
learned that, about Wolfman, but
every time they watch it, I have to say, do not repeat with these kids. This is,
right.
Yeah.
like there's a lot of disclaimers.
But yeah, let's go ahead. Matt was going to pivot it into Armored.
Okay.
yeah, obviously we're here to talk about Armored, man. It's on Kickstarter. You have the first 2 issues out, and so before we kind of dive into the comic book, what is your pitch? What is your 2, 3, 4 line pitch for what Armored is?
So Armored is about a boy who discovers a magical suit of armor, and it is being haunted by the original knight that used to wear it. And this armor has magical powers, and the knight has to train the boy how to use the armor.
I did love that. Yeah, it was. I love that you set it up like in this horror mystical way, and then it's like, oh, this, and
There's
then it
this
turns into like a kind of a comedy
tragic
almost
beginning.
there. Yeah,
Yeah,
Lauren, take it
it's-
away. A very tragic beginning.
Yeah. So right away, it was like tragic to where I was just like, my heart sunk. Like I wasn't expecting what happened at the ending or at the beginning, but then obviously it sets up the story for this kid to find this armor. Don't want to give any spoilers away, but you have multiple people dealing with grief in different ways at the beginning of this. So what inspired you to kick off the story in such a punch to the heart kind of moment?
I know. The first thing when like going into the writing of this, there was multiple aspects of it, like figuring out story structure for comic books versus film, but also going into it, I always had the idea of a haunted suit of armor with a ghost attached, and the ghost would be like the genie, from Aladdin, goofy, out of time. But then I started to get into it. I'm like, we're dealing with death here. Like, it's a ghost. So what is this kid going through? He's dealing with loss. He's adopted by a couple who are dealing with loss. You meet a girl in the town who's also lost someone. Like, loss is permeated throughout the story. And the thing I started looking at the armor as kind of a metaphor in a way. Like when we're dealing with something tragic or just something that really affects us, a lot of people will put up a metaphorical armor, like
Yeah, it's that wall you put up to like protect yourself.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so the main character has essentially put armor on himself to deal with the loss of his parents. So he's been abandoned essentially, and for 2 years all he cares about is finding them, and he's not going to open up to anybody. So that armor exists on him even if it isn't physical, it's physically there. And then that armor becomes a physical manifestation of what he's going through. And so I always thought like he has to shed that armor by the end of at least the first story arc, and that you'll have to read it to find out if he does.
Mm. I didn't even pick up on that metaphor, but yeah, that makes so much sense. So you did put a little thing at the end of the comic explaining what happened to your comic book collection, which made my jaw drop.
Yeah.
But it also helped because you said you had the story for a while, but you weren't sure which form you wanted to kind of explain it in or tell it in. So can you tell us what happened and what led you to choose to do this into comic book form?
Okay, so we just had our second child. So this is going back a ways. It's like 6 years ago. And, sleep deprivation. Both of you have kids. You don't get a lot of sleep.
Oh, yeah.
We had a sound machine going. He wasn't sleeping. We finally were sleeping. And it was one of those nights where the kid actually slept through the night. And someone broke into our garage and that I had all my comics being stored in there just because I was cleaning out. Actually, this back room is where all my comics are stored now, but I was cleaning it out and I put them all in the garage, and they broke in. They stole every single box that was in there. They stole, I had about a collection of probably 300 to 400 posters. They stole probably 150 movie posters. They stole winter stuff. They stole my wife's American Girl dolls. Yeah, from her childhood. Look at Lauren's face.
My
Lauren's a
Kirsten doll's right up
massive.
there.
I was gonna say Lauren, like that is very sentimental to Lauren as
I
well.
just
like,
got my first Kirsten doll for Mother's Day because they just re-released her, and because it was like I'd never got her in the 90s. I was always told she was too expensive. I read all the books. Like, that's crazy.
Okay, so we'll need to do a follow-up interview where I'll bring my wife on, because it sounds like she's gonna need some therapy along with, like, she's still. I think, it's hard to get those originals, right? And she's replaced it, but you get it, you buy it from someone on Facebook Marketplace, and it turns out it was like the 90s version. It's not the original. So it was devastating.
The original though, it means something different because, like, again, you said this from her childhood. Like, those are memories that have been built in like throughout her life. So it's like, that's money come and goes, but like memories are irreplaceable. So like I can only imagine.
And who steals those kind of things? Like, that's like,
they took everything.
Clearly stealing them to resell, because I feel like somebody who would love an American Girl doll or would love comic books isn't that evil, I would hope.
They were taking them to sell, because they took a lot of action figures. I collected a lot of action figures. I had kind of stopped by that point, but I had some of them in the garage, and they took all of them. I eventually found the action figures on eBay. So the police were able to help me get those back and trace it back to the house that presumably had taken the stuff. The house apartment building. I don't really know where exactly. I have an idea. The police won't tell me. Basically, the person that was there, it was like a squatter, essentially.
It was a crack den, yeah.
and they were selling it out of there, and I managed to get some action figures back that I didn't even want. That's the funny thing. I wanted my comics back.
Right.
Yeah. What was the question again? I'm just gonna cry now.
No, you're okay. I got off track too as soon as you said American Girl dolls. No, it was because you had this story for a while and you weren't sure if you wanted to do a film or comic book, and so this led you to almost re-falling in love with comics.
At first I told my wife I'm never collecting a comic again. I've had pull lists at different comic shops around Toronto, in my hometown in Cambridge and Waterloo, and I said to myself, I'm done. But then within a few months, I saw people on Facebook Marketplace, like, they had comics that I had as a child, and I was like, oh, I'd like Silver Surfer back. Oh, I'd like the Hulk comics back I had from the late 80s. And then I was just buying them, and I found a pawn shop near my house that sells 50-cent comics. Every comic is 50 cents.
Wow.
So I just started getting boxes and boxes and boxes, and then now that room, you can't even walk in there. It's just filled with boxes. So because of that, I started reading so much. Like, I found myself reading more comics than I was reading novels, movies, watching movies, everything. And I was like, why haven't I told a story in comic book form? And that's when the idea came back to me, and I was like, this idea makes way more sense as a comic than as a movie. Yeah, sure, I'd love it to be a movie or TV show, but, like, truth be told, I love it way more as a comic book series. So that's where it led to that. But also, after writing the first issue and second issue, I kind of realized, this whole story is about loss. And I'm still kind of, I'm now, through the comic, I think I've overcome the loss of my collection. So like, I'm so lucky. I haven't lost anyone close to me like the characters in the book have. But I do wonder how much of losing the comiks affected the story.
Well, because it's childhood, it's nostalgia, it's a connection to your dad, even, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Well, a lot of the comics, the boards, right? My dad would take me to comic conventions and then have artists draw pictures for me when I was like 6 or 7. So they're all gone. They were all in those boxes.
So now going back to the comic, the art is very dark, very beautiful, and almost like watercolor / charcoal at times. So was that a decision that you made, or was that something that the artist created on their own, how they thought it would be, and how much back and forth was that with the artist?
No, Well, so the art is done by Ishmael Hernandez. He's a Spanish watercolor comic book artist. He fairly new, I think, to the scene. Like he had done a few independent that I think are European, maybe one American thing, but we found him on Facebook, on a Facebook group, and my editor was like, "What do you think of this guy?" And I'd seen it, I thought it was cool, and then I showed it to my wife, and she was like, "This is awesome." And between her and my editor, they were like, "You need to go with this guy," and he already has that dark quality to his art. Like it's very moody, and he's an amazing sequential storyteller. So when both of them said they loved it, I was like, I gotta go for this. I gotta, and so I hired Ishmael, and really it's just his style, to be completely honest. And I think he probably understands the tone, because I think in the first issue I would describe like what the sky looked like, and I send him a lot of reference. Like I sent him, like, there's a school in the book. I just sent him pictures of my school. My school, my high school was like it was like Hogwarts. It's like an old school.
Oh wow.
In Canada. It's really weird that it looks like a Hogwarts school. But and then I would send him pictures of like castles I had been to as a kid in Germany, things like that. And so I think between his style and the references, how we got there, the only real back and forth was in character design. I kept pushing him for things I wanted. Like I wanted the suit of armor to look a certain way. And we kept, like, at first he made it very lean and skinny and small. And I was like, no, make it big, make it like every kid wants to own.
Right. Yeah.
So there was the only real back and forth really was with the designs of the characters.
Well, like even opening up, you're talking about like, issue 1 opens up like somewhere in the countryside. It's got the greens and like the broken down castle. And this is kind of where like this first issue takes place. And so it's cool getting to see like you traveled a lot. You saw some castles in Germany and then like your school and things like that. So like, how did you come up with the way it's, because essentially it's like a little armor piece that he presses. How did you come up with the way that's how the suit of armor almost comes on you, like a Power Ranger or like Iron Man or something like that? Did any of those influences come into how the suit of armor kind of comes on to our main character?
No, you know what? It was a necessity, because at first I didn't even think of it. And I was writing the script and I thought, wait a minute, he can't throw the armor into his backpack. That's so heavy. And so I immediately thought of the like medallion piece. I don't even know what to call it. People have called it different things, but yeah, like a medallion thing. And then I love the idea of it like forming to his body. Like, I was a big fan of Spawn as a kid and still collect Spawn, and how it's like kind of alive. And then there was one issue of Rom, the comic book series Rom.
Yeah.
Where on the cover he's like this, and the armor I think is being torn off him. I sent that to Ishmael and said, use that as reference for when he transforms and how it.
I can see. I'm looking. I have it pulled up right here. Like I'm looking. That makes a lot of sense now. Yeah, that's kind of what I was seeing at first. I thought Iron Man, but now I kind of see that.
Yeah, even Iron Man. I'm sure there's influence with that.
Right.
Watching a lot of MCU, how can I not reference?
Right.
Yeah.
And so now, did you always kind of have like the idea too, with like he's got that with the genie, obviously, but like now moving on, there's also a subplot, if you will. You mentioned, the girl has a pretty tragic, like, it seems like parents are disappearing. And so now we got these orphans or something. Now, how is that going to play into the bigger overall picture? Do you have plans? Because I know you mentioned the first arc, which I believe is the first arc 5 issues, or how many issues do you plan on doing the first arc?
First arc is 5 issues. So if by issue 5 you're like, this isn't for me, you'll have a full story. You're stuck with it, but you'll have a full story. But yeah.
Right. I mean, that all wraps up. Yeah, right. That makes sense.
And then, so the plan is to do 5-issue arc, whether it be 50 issues or 20 issues or 100, depends on how well it does. We're getting such great feedback when it comes to when people read it, they love it. The hardest part is convincing people to read an indie book that isn't from Image or Dark Horse, or like, it's really hard to like, I'm not self-publishing it. Like, a lot of people think I am, but it's Clover Press, and Clover Press is not known for single issues. They're known for graphic novels and art books where they release the art of David Mack, the art of Alex Malev. And so I have to like explain who they are as well. And they're kind of new. Like, they're the owners of the company used to own IDW. So they're well versed in comics. They know how
everything works. Yeah.
It's just, they're now running a new company, and they're starting out as well. It's just, and it's slightly different. They're high-end art book. And even Armored, it's printed on different paper. Like, I even feel like it feels different. I don't. If you don't have a physical copy, I will make sure you guys get physical copies. But it's
I'd love physical media. Hell yeah, that's
someone's
awesome.
house is on fire. Is it yours, Lauren?
No, all of a sudden apparently the battery's dying. That's why I keep muting it, because I'll literally just started.
Oh
So
no.
it's not on fire, but if it does go on fire, I won't know, because apparently the battery's dying.
Well,
yeah. So, what was your question? Did I go off?
No, you did. And then like, how did you get hooked up with like Clover, for example? Because I know like you guys kind of started Kickstarter, and a lot of people don't even realize in the comic book space now, we're seeing a lot of creator owned comic books. Like Magma was kind of a spinoff from like IDW and a couple other companies. They've got their own thing. Like creator owned is like a big thing right now. So how did you get linked up with Clover for this book?
So I love comics, but I don't know them. I didn't know anyone in the industry. Like I have to admit, I wasn't the type of collector that wanted to get autographed. Like I'm more of a guy that just wants to get like cheap comics and like fill holes in the story. Like I'm all about the story. I wasn't really about creator. So I'd never really met anyone. And my editor, I think he had sent it to Dark Horse and Clover because he had just worked on a book called The Golem of it's called The Golem of Venice Beach. And Clover was going to publish that book that he edited. And sent it to them. And I, in the meantime, sent it to Image Comic. And Image has the submission process where it's like you just email it and you're like, bye, I don't know what's going to happen. Will you email me back?
See you later. Hope you find your dad.
And I almost found it irritating. I don't know. Maybe because I've been in the film industry so long, there's just so much BS that I was like, can't take any more BS from other industries. This is painful. Like, I think I even emailed them at one point, like it had been a week, being like, can you just at least tell me if you're going to email me back? That would be great. And, nothing. And then Hank Canales from Clover Press, he's the publisher. He told Chris he had read the issue and he loved it and he wanted to publish Armored. So we got on a call and he was so enthusiastic about it and what I wanted to do with it. Like they do primarily graphic novels and art books. And I was like, I want this to be single issues. And he's like, we can do that for you. As painful as it is now I know why they don't like to do it. I've learned a lot. They hate it. And I'm beginning to hate it too. I like it because it's a great marketing tool. It kind of legitimizes the comic a bit, I find. But their process is kickstart it, then release it direct market. That's just how they do everything. And that I wasn't used to either. I've backed a few Kickstarters, but the whole process was kind of foreign to me. So I just loved Hank's enthusiasm. To me, I was like, they're so enthusiastic. There's no BS. The guy used to work at DC Comics. He co-wrote Youngblood with Rob Liefeld. This guy knows what he's doing. And
he knows what he's doing. Yeah, he's been around.
Yeah. He wrote Teen Titans back in the day. So I was like, this guy, I got to go with him. So that's how I ended up with Clover.
So
nice.
Being that it starts Kickstarter and then they push out. So are people able to get this obviously in their comic book shops then?
Oh yeah. It was sold through Diamond and Lunar, and it sold out. Issue 1 sold out at Diamond. I think it was the first or second week of release. And so I know they've had some extra copies and they had to send them to Diamond just to fulfill like some of the orders. But it's still hard. Like we've sold out, but it's like, it's hard to convince people still. Like you can place an order still, and there are like a few copies left. Like it's so hard to convince people to try an indie book.
It is. You would think it's a lot, like, especially with being the first prints kind of sold out, which is like really impressive. But you're right. It is a much harder marketing space almost because people are so kind of, I don't even know if it's timid or what it is, but you're absolutely right. And now being that, before we kind of get to, what people can expect for the next 3, because the first 2 issues are out. Issue 2 came out June 26th. Does this mean, are you already thinking about different stories you could write into comic books, or is this kind of like, maybe I'll just cool down for a bit?
Oh, no. I'm not stopping. This is, I refuse. I'm like, if I could just write comics, I would love it. But like, I don't think you can make money in comics. Like, I feel like I don't know when I'll ever get out of this debt that I've put myself in because I fund the comic myself. And the whole film industry has completely been destroyed. So it's a weird situation I'm in right now, but I am not stopping. So I know I mentioned my wife earlier, but my wife is also a writer. She used to she was a showrunner on a kids TV show up here in Canada called The Next Step. And we had this story, again, similar situation where I was like, what is this story? Is it a movie? Is it a TV series? Like, what's this going to be? And we were like, after I'd gone through the process with Armored, and then when my whole VFX career blew up because the streamers contracted so much they're not making a lot of content anymore, we decided, well, now's the time to write this let's make it a comic. So we're actually 50 pages, so we're into issue 2 now of my second series, which is her first series that we've co-written together. And when I say 50 pages are done, we've hired an artist from Italy to do all the interior pages for us, and she's done the 50 pages, and I think the first 40 are even lettered. So we're moving forward. I'm full steam ahead in comics. Yeah.
You're the second person that we've gotten an interview that's like, you know what? I'm actually doing this with my wife. It's really cool because we don't really hear a lot of that stuff, especially, indie comics. A lot of people are like, well, I did this. I got started in X-Men, but now it's like, it's a team thing. So that's honestly also got to be like even more invigorating and just get you guys like even more motivated. Like, how does that writing process with you guys work? Do you guys bounce ideas off each other or take turns doing panels and pages then? Or how does the process for you guys work?
Well, it's interesting because okay, so I write for film. So I work with Peter. It's just me and him usually. But she writes on a team, right? Like, she's the showrunner, so she oversees like a team of writers. So we're already used to collaborating with people. So it was a pretty easy process. We broke the story together. It was literally, index cards and pens and putting up scenes and like treating it almost like a movie to some degree, but plotting it for a comic. Understanding story structure. Like, we have an understanding of story structure, and we just applied that to comic book structure. And it was just that we plotted it together. We take turns writing the scene, and then we kind of hop back and forth. Like, I'll take the next, I'll do a pass on the 10, you'll do a pass on the 10, and so it's a bit of leapfrogging.
Oh man, that's so awesome. I always just love hearing the getting to collab, and it's also like bonding time for you guys in a way that a lot of people, it's like really cool. And now talking about Armored, I know the first 2 issues are out, so what can people expect as the next 3 issues come out and we wrap up this first arc?
So things really move in this book. I don't know if I sent you guys issue 2 at all, so you may not have had a chance to read it, have you?
I don't know. I think we
have. Oh my goodness. My apologies. I should have sent it to you.
We are happy to support anyway. No, I'm all fine. Like buying the physical copy. Don't even stress, man.
So things move. Like, you're gonna see, like, within issue 2, we resolve some things. Like, you'll find out what that creature is in issue 2 immediately. Like, I was like, people are paying $5 a comic, and if you're kickstarting it, you're paying $10.
Right.
So I was like, there has to be story in this. I go to the comic shop every Wednesday, and I come home with a stack, and I'm so sick of picking up a book that cost me $6.99, $5.99, and being like, nothing. Why did I just spend this money? And so I was like, I want to tell a full story in 5 issues, and you'll see it moves. Like, the story of Andy and having to deal with that loss is wrapped up within that 5 issue. We start a brand new story on the final page of issue 5, which leads into the next arc. You don't have to continue if you don't want to, but it really is it's quite the final page that Ishmael has drawn. And it opens up the whole world of Armored. Like, it makes it, people that have read the final one are like, I was hoping you'd go there. So
this is almost like a prologue then, these first 5 issues to like a bigger universe in a way.
Oh, definitely. Like, I could easily do 50 issues, like, no question. 100, I would definitely be getting into some weirder territories, I think. But 50, it would be so easy. And then if this book fails, it will be 20 issues. So if it's a big failure, yeah.
I mean, to translate into filmmaking, I mean, we've got so many movies and stuff out there now that are like, again, in the movie space, 2.5 hours plus. Now, the 90-minute movie is, so to speak, is kind of like a dead thing, but you're kind of bringing it back in comic form. Like you said, this is fast paced. Hey, we're going. I want people to be able to, and I think that's honestly, I love that because issue 1 ends on a cliffhanger, and you're almost immediately like, dude, I need that next issue now. And so you kind of do that and you move it along. I really enjoy that. Give us like the 90-minute storyline in comic books, movies again, because I think you're doing a really great thing with that. It makes so much sense. And I love to see that and just how much excitement there is. And it's a very beautifully drawn comic book. There's a lot of intrigue and mystery, and I love a good ghost story as well. So I know I'm going to be following this myself, and hopefully everybody else. I mean, it sounds like you've got a pretty good fan base with, the first prints are out already.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I feel. Yeah, sorry, you go, Lauren.
Oh, I was just going to say, I love it. It's a great combination of real life issues mixed with supernatural issues. It was a very good balance.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm a big fan of like even Stranger Things. Like I love that show, but I do get
Yeah.
frustrated when there's filler. Like there's so much filler sometimes. Like even I'll find like a full season is like, well, this was filler. We could have just had episode one, and I didn't want to do that with it. So I hope I'm noticing I have some real diehard fans already. I just need it to grow a bit more.
Yeah. Well, it's that word of mouth. I mean, the diehard fans hopefully tell and say, hey, you should check it out. And then what we do too on nerdinitiative.com, we write comic book reviews and we like to talk about these things. So we'll probably put this interview up there. So hopefully we can reach and start to find these word of mouth, because that's how it is. Like marketing in comic books is, if anybody's cracked the code, please let Mike know, let us know, because I have no idea how you market comic books these days. Nobody really does. So if anybody out there has the answer other than word of mouth and going to your local comic book shop and supporting them and supporting good creators like that. And with that said, are you going to be at any upcoming Comic-Cons kind of sporting the book? Are you going to be anywhere people can find you here soon?
I am doing. This is the great thing about the book is a lot of people have reacted really positively to it. I have a signing lined up every single Saturday this summer. I'm all over the place. I was just in New Jersey. I did a signing at the Secret Stash, Kevin Smith's store.
Oh yeah.
That was amazing. So I got to meet Kevin Smith, and the staff treated me like gold, and they acted like I had been doing this for years, which was very flattering.
And it's like a Kevin Smith museum in there.
It is.
He's one of the
I
nicest
got to visit
people
a few
I've
months
ever gotten.
ago. It was like crazy.
It is. It almost didn't feel real. Like it was a bit surreal being in there. Like I'm in the back of the shop signing comic. People are lining up at the table. This is weird. And it's Kevin Smith's store. They should be finding him. He's somewhere around here. Go find him. So I did that, and then I was at a comic store called Zap, and then I'm all over the Toronto area. Like I have because I am local to Toronto, I have like shops in my hometown asking me to do signings, but I am going to be at San Diego Comic-Con. I'll be at the Clover booth. So I'll be signing it there. And then Golden Apple Comic in Los Angeles on Melrose, which is one of the most famous comic stores in LA. Yeah. They invited me to do a signing on August 3rd, so I'll be there. Sadly enough, I was rejected from the Toronto Comic Con, so I will not be there.
That's okay. Lauren somehow got invited, on press to New York City, and I didn't, even though we submitted the same exact thing. So it's sometimes, they don't know what they're missing.
I'm a diversity hire. That's my theory.
Diversity hire, interesting.
I think they got a bunch of guys that applied and not enough girls. So I can't think of anything else.
So funny.
It is funny how that works. Even though
you're right, we hear a lot of great comic creators get denied for cons, and other random people will get it. You never know.
I also they give priority to the people who had previously come, and sometimes it's 100% what would you call it? Re-signing up.
The people that redid it, they did. Hey, I did this last year. I'm gonna go. Which I get, but also, I think we should be getting also new faces in there a lot too, because cons are also how people discover new books. I mean, I can't tell you how many new books I've discovered at Comic-Cons. So just getting out there and the word of mouth, man. Just like San Diego's gonna be awesome. I cannot wait to kind of see, like, to follow along your journey to San Diego and then Golden Apple. Like those are really, really awesome things that are getting to come up that I'm so jealous of, because that's obviously a big one for people.
Yeah, it'll be my first time at the con. I've been to San Diego many times, but never to the convention. So I'm.
And that's soon.
Yeah,
it's Lauren and I are actually going to be gone. That's why we aren't going this year.
Hopefully next year,
because we've never been. I got invited out, but obviously we can't this year, which would have been awesome to get to meet you. But I mean, we're gonna find our way at cons, and also just we love traveling, so hopefully we'll get to link up here soon. So I know you've talked about, the other comic book project that you're talking about with, your wife. You're working on that, and the next arcs and the other 3 issues of Armored. But is there anything else that you're working on at the moment that you want people to kind of be on the lookout for?
No, just Armored. Everyone needs to read Armored. That's it. I'm more, I am always working. I am working on more R.L. Stine movies. We're the director and Peter and I are developing. Oh my goodness, a teen horror movie based on one of his books. Another tween horror book, like along the lines of Zombie Town. We have a lot of R.L. Stine stuff up in the air right now, and we even have a meeting this week about a possible really cool TV show that we're developing. So I'm always developing that stuff, but yeah, Armored is front and center, number one. Everyone just check it out. And I always tell people, literally just DM me. I will send you a PDF of issue 1. And if you don't want to DM me for some reason, you can actually sign up for Clover's newsletter. And if you do that, you get issue 1 for free, the PDF now, as of this week.
Oh, wow.
So they're really pushing it. It was also just named one of the top 30 comics of the year by the Comic Book Couples Counseling podcast.
Oh yeah, we know them. Yeah, we know them. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we know that. That's really awesome.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's so cool.
There's no reason not to read the first issue at this point. Like there's no reason at all.
You're finding excuses at that point.
You see, like AMC will like release the first episode of The Walking Dead, but not 2 or 3. They're like, no, we're gonna get you hooked, and then you're gonna buy the next one. That's smart.
Yeah.
Because if it's not good, people won't buy it. But if it's good, you're gonna get hooked. And this was a great first comic. I thought it was fantastic.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you, Lauren.
It is absolutely worth the read, and I would die on that. There's a reason why it's in the top, of comic books you got to read this year. I guarantee you it's in ours as well. It was such a fun read, and Michael, thank you for taking the time to get to hang out with us and talk about this great book. And dude, I can't wait to get back and talk about it more. Where can people find you and follow you and all the good stuff, since social media dominates so much of what we do?
Well, on Threads and Instagram, you can find me at Mike Schwartz Wright. And over on X, you can find me at the Mike Schwartz. Those are probably the best 2 places to find me. Or you can hear me on the Wizards podcast, as you mentioned earlier, the Wizards podcast Guide to Comics, where we examine each issue of Wizard Magazine. We're currently about to record issue 95 this week. And we're going in order. So we're almost entering the 2000s.
Nice. That is, heck yeah, man. Everything's in the show notes. Please, I can't recommend enough, man. Like, seriously, everybody out there listening's got to check this out. Thank you again for taking time out of your evening and getting to talk. This was awesome. So thank you again for sharing everything that you shared with us today. And I know Armored is going to be one that we're definitely following and we're pushing ourselves, whether it's on this podcast or Nerd Initiative as well.
Thank you,
Lauren?
guys. I really appreciate it so much.
Of course. Lauren, any final thoughts as we wrap up?
No, I think we're good to go. I will say there was a little humor in it too. So you don't just expect, the scary, creepy stuff. There's a couple of the lighthearted giggle moments as well, which are my favorite kind of comics. The gorgeous art, the intense, storyline. You made me feel things, man. I definitely felt emotional while watching it. I giggled. I hit all of them, and those are the best comic books. And comic books are short, and if you can hit all those things in one, I think it's a great comic. Yeah. So those are my final thoughts. And I'm going to go put new batteries in my smoke detector.
Lauren's going to take care of her smoke detector. We are going to talk to you guys here soon. Make sure you check all of that out, and we will see you guys later. Cheers.
The content you are listening to is part of the Nerd Initiative Podcast Network. For more info about the home of pop culture positivity, check out nerdinitiative.com. The content you are listening to is part of the Nerd Initiative Podcast Network. For more info about the home of pop culture positivity, be sure to check out nerdinitiative.com.